property values, employment opportunity and diversity, infrastructure, city programs, and cultural influences. No one region is better than the other. There are just subtle differences, and with the exception of Elmira, who stands head and shoulder above the rest, the divide is inconsequential. Anybody want to take a guess where Mo lives? And I think one of the reasons we haven't done the amalgamation thing around here, one of the reasons we haven't never got to that and probably never will be, is because there's too many fiefdoms. And I'm being sincere when I say that. Kitchener is looking after Kitchener. Waterloo is looking after Waterloo, and Cambridge looks after Cambridge. And they like it that way. They like it that way. I think we could save a lot of money on tax dollars if we finally just ironed out the map and say, voila, we are now officially one city. The townships, you guys are still good. But if you're coming to where the roads aren't paved with gold, we're still just one big happy family. This is Rogers TV at 570 News. It is 10:35. Happy Friday. And yes, that is a frost warning out for tonight, but that's okay. We'll probably have a humidity warning next week, so don't worry about it so much. Yeah, if you're not fond of the weather, wait a minute or just move 5 minutes away. I want to talk about something that shouldn't be happening. This happens to me a lot. I hear about something that is an issue, and I think, seriously? Then I got to check the calendar. It's 2013, right? Why do we still have discussions about slavery? Why do we still have discussions about human trafficking? I don't get it. I don't understand. First of all, it baffles me that it's happening at all, any place, but why is it a topic of conversation in Canada the Good? Why? It's not an issue here, surely. Is it? We're joined in the program by Shae Invidiata. Shae is born and raised in Oakville. Thankfully, with the power plant's gone, she's going to go home now and still recognize it. But she's on a mission to end human trafficking and takes time to join us to talk about it today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. Thank you.
Good to get you on the show. Why is this still an issue, Shae?
The issue itself, when you say, why does slavery still exist and why does human trafficking still exist? And most people would say that today's slavery doesn't exist because we've got laws that outlaw slavery globally around the world. And the difference is that we now have this, I want to call it more a recent new word called human trafficking, which changes the laws and legislation. And we've had to recognize what modern day slavery is. And that's where this word human trafficking is introduced.
Okay, so what's the difference between slavery and human trafficking?
I would argue that there really is no difference. It's the forms of slavery that we would traditionally think working in the field or going back to the transatlantic slave when you saw, white people dominantly having slaves over black people. And that's visible for us. And so we saw individuals owning people, having them do things for free, and that they own them as property. Today, human trafficking is in many different forms, whether it's in sexual exploitation, still including forced labor, children of war, you have chattel labor, debt bondage, which is ancestral debt passed on from generation to generation. And it's taken quite a few years for the world, really, and different governments in the UN to wrap their head around that human trafficking is, in fact, slavery. And we need now to introduce new legislation to be able to fight this horrific crime.
Well, do we need, with all due respect, do we need new legislation? Do we just need to enforce the laws we have?
Well, it would make my job a lot easier if we would just enforce the laws that we have, and including and amending the Slavery Act to include the term human trafficking. But from a global standpoint, that has not taken place, and there's been a lot of new legislation from the UN level that's filtered down to countries like the United States that's been very well combating human trafficking for about 10 years now. So Canada, we are a bit behind, but we are catching up, I'd like to say. And we've actually amended 2 criminal codes in Canada over the past 3 years to help to strengthen our laws right here in our country.
Are we a bit behind because we just don't want to believe it?
I think, yeah, Canadians overall, we're more neutral based, and we'd like to think that maybe we don't have as many issues or dramatic problems, so to speak, as maybe the United States. But I think ignorance plays a huge factor in people not understanding what they're actually looking at. And from the government standpoint, the lack of research that Canada has not had for many years has been a hard sell to convince the government that we actually have a problem. And it's really only been in the past 5 years with amazing people like Benjamin Perrin, who's a professor out of Faculty of Law out of University of British Columbia, who spent years compiling research and data around human trafficking across Canada. He wrote an incredible book called Invisible Chains, and it addresses those issues. And so over the past few years, we've been bringing this at a federal level to the government. And just last June, we were able to implement a national strategy. So Canada now finally has a national action plan to combat human trafficking. So I think we're at a very unique point in history, in Canadian history, in that over the next 5 to 10 years, Freedom and our mission is to really encourage the government and work with them to radically tackle this issue in our country.
Explain to me what you do at the group Free Them. I know you founded it, but give me the Reader's Digest condensed version.
Sure. Free Them is it's an organization that, of course, fights human trafficking here in Canada, and we partner with smaller groups abroad in places like Cambodia and in India. But our mandate and our heartbeat is to raise awareness and funds. I truly believe you can't fight something that you're not aware exists, and surely you're not going to give a donation to something that you don't understand. And so our mandate is really on the awareness and advocacy side. And we work with all levels of government, all levels of law enforcement, and then we fund all different NGOs that are doing incredible work to rescue victims of trafficking here in Canada and going through the rehabilitation process. So you can find Free Them throughout the year in Toronto doing amazing events, and that's why we're talking to you today, actually, where we've got our event this Saturday that's presented by the Fairmont Royal York. It's our annual Freedom Walk, and there'll be hundreds of people that are going to come out as civilians to learn and understand about human trafficking, and you'll hear from leading experts in the field from across Canada around human trafficking, whether they're politicians, law enforcement, survivors of human trafficking. And so that's really what we do. We want to engage the public. We want to engage students. We want to engage adults, businesses, corporations to say, hey, this is going on in Canada, and we will not tolerate our women and children to be bought or sold.
A couple of years ago, I had on a young man from Africa who had written a book about his life as one of the boy soldiers. And I was absolutely stunned when I read the book to see the details of what him and other 10 and 11-year-old boys were put through. But when you talk about human trafficking and ways to use people as chattel, my frame of reference is always developing nations. And as a journalist, I guess I'm naive because it does happen here. It is going on. Maybe I just don't want to believe it of Canada the Good.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And last year, we actually had Canada's largest human trafficking case that's ever gone before Canadian courts, was rescuing 26 Hungarian men that had been internationally trafficked across our borders for forced labor. And part of what was going on inside the house was exactly what you're referring to as well, with the chattel bondage and also domestic servitude. There were some women involved. And so we had that happening right here in our own country, out in the Stoney Creek, Ancaster, Hamilton area just last year.
Well, Shae, thank you for that slap upside the head. I think we all need to hear this, and I appreciate and value the work that you do. Good luck tomorrow. Stay in touch. It's a fascinating conversation. Hopefully someday you're out of work.
Thank you so much, Gary, and I hope the same thing, too. I'd like to retire.
Take care. Bye-bye. Shae Invidiata, who is the founder of Free Them. Shae has received a lot of awards and recognition for her work with Free Them and with advocating and teaching us all about what was going on with human trafficking. And they've got a big walkathon tomorrow in Toronto, and that's how we found out about it. Are you like me? Are you surprised to hear this is happening in Canada? Or am I the naive one here? Because this one really bothers me. a lot bothers me. This is one of them. And we've done stories on prostitution, and we had a sex worker in studio a couple of years ago who says it's her choice. Nobody's ever forced her to do this. So there's the two faces, if I can put it that way, of prostitution in Canada. Prostitution is human trafficking. It is. At its core. Now, there may be some independent entrepreneurs who think differently. My attitude really hasn't changed much. But when I hear about human trafficking, when I hear about using children as chattel, I'm offended. I don't know where it is. I think we should ferret it out and expose it for what it is. And the people responsible, if we can hold them legally responsible, there's a special room waiting for them for treating individuals this way. Do you think this is a problem in Canada, or is this a third world issue? Do you see evidence of it? Your calls are next. This is Rogers TV and 570 News.